New York, the city that never sleeps, was the perfect stage for the incessant dance between power and resilience, between the blinding glitter of wealth and the quiet but unshakable strength of humanity. In its mirrored skyscrapers, where fortunes were made and undone in the blink of an eye, lived Arthur Sterling, a name that echoed through the corridors of Wall Street and the most exclusive society columns. Arthur was the embodiment of modern success, a financial empire built with cunning and voracious ambition, a penthouse apartment with panoramic views of Central Park, and an aura of invincibility that, for many, was as palpable as the air they breathed. He was a man who had achieved everything money could buy, and perhaps because of that he had lost the ability to see the value in anything that didn't come with an exorbitant price tag. His worldview was filtered through a lens of cold pragmatism and an almost artistic cynicism. To Arthur, people were pieces on a global chessboard, driven by vested interests and calculated by their profit potential. Empathy was a weakness, dedication a naivete. And it was with this mindset that he crossed paths with Isabella Rossi, a nurse whose world was as distant from his as the earth from the sky, but whose values were as solid as the foundations of Arthur's buildings. Isabella didn't have a financial empire, nor a name that resonated in elite circles. Her wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in the gratitude of the patients she cared for, the dignity she restored, and the hope she ignited amid pain and despair. She worked tirelessly in the emergency room of one of New York's busiest hospitals, a place where life and death collided every minute, and where human frailty was exposed in its rawest form. Her days were long, her nights often interrupted by emergency calls. Fatigue was a constant companion, but her passion for her profession was a flame that never faded. The meeting that would seal their fates took place at a charity event, one of those lavish galas where New York's elite gathered to display their generosity and, more importantly, their status. Arthur was there out of obligation, bored by the superficial conversations and the blatant ostentation. Isabella, for her part, had been invited as a representative of the hospital, an honor she accepted in the hope of raising funds for the pediatric ward. She looked stunning, in a simple yet elegant gown that contrasted with the designer outfits and sparkling jewelry surrounding her. Her beauty, however, was not that of a magazine cover, but that of a gentle soul and a strong spirit that radiated a light all its own. Arthur, with his discerning gaze and condescending smile, noticed her, not for her beauty, but for the simplicity that distinguished her from the crowd. He approached, not with the intention of flirting, but to exercise his favorite pastime, belittling. "So what's such a modest young lady doing at an event like this?" he asked, his tone bordering on sarcasm. Isabella, accustomed to the arrogance of some, responded with her characteristic serenity. "I'm a nurse, Mr. Sterling. I represent St. Jude Hospital." Arthur's smile widened, but his eyes narrowed in a mixture of disdain and superiority. He let out a short, dry laugh that echoed in her ears like a tuneless bell, and then, with a voice full of derision, he uttered the words that would remain etched in Isabella's memory, and which would become the title of this story. "You're just a nurse." The billionaire mocked, his tone turning the profession into an insult, as if Isabella's dedication were something insignificant, something minor, something undeserving of his respect. He continued, oblivious to Isabella's expression. "What could you possibly know about the real world, about business, about what really matters?" He shrugged, as if the conversation had reached its natural end, and turned to rejoin the crowd of bigwigs. Isabella, for a moment, felt the blow. Not from the personal offense, but from the devaluation of a profession she loved and that saved lives every day. But her resilience was greater than Arthur's arrogance. She took a deep breath, held her head high, and continued her mission, certain that a person's true worth is not measured by their bank balance, but by their ability to touch and transform lives. Little did Arthur know that those words, spoken with such contempt, would be the prelude to an event that would change his life forever, and force him to confront the truth that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places and the most unlikely hands. And if you're starting to feel the tension of this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters that will captivate you from beginning to end. Arthur Sterling lived in a gilded cage, though he would never admit it. His penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the Manhattan skyline was a sanctuary of luxury and seclusion. Every piece of furniture was a work of art, every object a testament to his purchasing power. But behind the opulence lay a void that not even the rarest antique or the most expensive bottle of wine could fill. Arthur's life was a succession of high-level meetings, ruthless negotiations, and decisions that moved billions. He was a born strategist, a shark in the financial ocean, and his mind was constantly on edge, calculating risks, anticipating moves, and searching for the next big opportunity. This relentless pursuit of success had taken its toll. Arthur had no close friends, only associates and sycophants. His relationships were superficial, transactional. Family was a distant memory, a tangle of expectations and disappointments he preferred not to revisit. He ate at Michelin-starred restaurants, but often alone, his cell phone his only company. He slept few hours, tormented by graphs and projections dancing in his mind. Stress was a constant, a background hum he had learned to ignore, but it silently eroded his health. For the past few months, Arthur had been experiencing unusual fatigue, an intermittent chest pain he attributed to poor posture or anxiety. He was a man who despised weakness, and the idea of seeing a doctor felt like an admission of vulnerability. "It's just stress," he repeated to himself as he swallowed another headache pill and forced himself to spend another sleepless night reviewing reports. His diet was erratic, based on strong coffee and quick meals eaten between calls. Exercise? A joke. The only movement he made was between his office chair and the back seat of his armored car. He was king of his own castle, but a king imprisoned by his own ambitions and a self-destructive lifestyle. His arrogance, which Isabella had experienced firsthand, was a form of armor, a defense against a world he saw as hostile and opportunistic. He believed that to survive at the top, one had to be ruthless, suspicious, and above all, superior. The idea that someone inferior could have something to teach him was absurd. The phrase, "you're just a nurse," was not only an insult to Isabella, but a reflection of his own distorted worldview, where a person's worth was directly proportional to their power and wealth. He was so blinded by his own grandiosity that he failed to see the richness of spirit, dedication, and strength that existed in people like Isabella, who worked behind the scenes, building and healing, while he focused only on accumulating. He didn't know it, but his body was sending him warning signals, whispers he stubbornly ignored. The fatigue, the chest pain, the occasional shortness of breath, all of it was the prelude to a perfect storm brewing inside him. And when that storm broke, it wouldn't be his billions nor his powerful connections that would save him. It would be the hand of a simple nurse, the same one he had scorned, that would reach out to pull him back from the abyss. The irony of fate is often cruel, but it can also be the most effective of teachers. And Arthur Sterling was about to get an unforgettable lesson. If you're feeling the tension rising, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. While Arthur Sterling drowned in his own opulence and loneliness, Isabella Rossi navigated a sea of daily challenges, where each wave represented a life to be saved, a pain to be alleviated, a hope to be restored. Her routine in the emergency room at St. Jude Hospital was a whirlwind of adrenaline and compassion. The smell of antiseptic and coffee, the constant sound of heart monitors and ambulance sirens, the uninterrupted flow of patients with a wide range of afflictions, all this was the backdrop to her life, a backdrop she embraced with an almost sacred dedication. Isabella didn't choose nursing by chance. She grew up in a modest neighborhood in Queens, the daughter of Italian immigrants who worked tirelessly to give their children a better life. From an early age, she learned the value of hard work, community, and mutual aid. Her mother, a seamstress, with calloused hands and a huge heart, always said, "True wealth lies in what you can do for others, not in what you can accumulate for yourself." This phrase became a mantra for Isabella. When her grandmother fell ill and spent her final days in a hospital, Isabella, as a teenager, was fascinated by the way the nurses cared for her, not just her body, but her soul. It was there that she found her purpose. Her college years were arduous, juggling studies with part-time jobs to help out at home. She graduated with honors, but her true education came on the front lines, in the chaos and beauty of the emergency room. She saw it all: shocking accidents, terminal illnesses, miraculous births, the joy of reunion and the pain of loss. Each experience shaped her, made her stronger, more empathetic, more aware of the fragility of life and the importance of each moment. Unlike Arthur, who saw the world through numbers and transactions, Isabella saw the world through faces, stories, and emotions. To her, each patient was a universe, a complexity of fears and hopes. She wasn't just a technician administering medications and monitoring vital signs. She was a listener, a counselor, a helping hand, a safe haven in the midst of the storm. Her ability to connect with people, to offer comfort with a simple touch or a gentle look, was her greatest skill, something no amount of money could buy or replicate. Arthur Sterling's scorn, though painful, did not shake her deeply. She had faced far greater challenges. The devaluation of her profession was a constant battle, but she knew the value of what she did. She saw death up close, and it taught her to value life. She saw pain, and it taught her to value compassion. She was an unsung hero, one of the many who worked tirelessly behind the scenes of society, keeping the wheels of life turning. Her strength came not from titles or fortune, but from her unshakable faith in humanity and her own purpose. That night of the charity event, as Arthur returned to his ivory tower, Isabella returned to her small apartment in Queens, exhausted, but at peace. She knew her work was important, that every life she touched mattered. And ironically, Arthur's arrogance only reinforced her conviction. She was, yes, just a nurse, but a nurse who carried within her the capacity to heal, to comfort, and, as fate would soon prove, to save. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, was about to orchestrate a reunion that would defy all expectations and prove that true power lies in humanity and the capacity to serve. If you're eager to see how fate will bring these two very different worlds together, don't forget to like and subscribe to follow every detail of this journey. Fate, with its peculiar irony, orchestrated the reunion of Arthur Sterling and Isabella Rossi in a way neither of them could have foreseen. Not in a gala ballroom nor in a hospital, but in one of New York's most iconic and bustling locations, Grand Central Terminal. Arthur was on his way to a last-minute meeting in Washington, D.C., a private flight awaiting him, but an unexpected delay forced him to stop at the station to meet one of his lawyers. He was impatient, his cell phone glued to his ear, barking orders and demanding results, oblivious to the hubbub of thousands of lives intersecting around him. That same day, Isabella had taken a rare break. She planned to visit her great-aunt in Connecticut, and Grand Central was her starting point. She sat on one of the historic wooden benches, observing the imposing architecture and the chaotic yet harmonious dance of people. Her thoughts were far from the emergency room, enjoying that brief moment of peace before the journey. The contrast between Arthur's frantic haste and Isabella's calm observation could not have been more stark. Arthur, in the midst of his heated phone conversation, felt a sharp pang in his chest, stronger than the previous ones. He ignored it. He attributed it to the stress of the negotiation. But the pain intensified, radiating down his left arm. His vision began to blur, and the sound of the lawyer's voice on the phone became distant. He staggered, trying to support himself against a column, but his legs gave way. The cell phone slipped from his hands, falling to the marble floor with a loud thud. Arthur Sterling, the unshakable billionaire, collapsed amid the indifferent crowd of Grand Central Terminal. The chaos of the station for a brief moment seemed to freeze for Isabella. She didn't hear the sound of the crash, but she felt it. An instinct, a keen perception that only years of emergency experience could provide. Her eyes swept the crowd and landed on the imposing figure lying on the ground, surrounded by a bubble of curiosity and hesitation. People passed by. Some stared. Others looked away, assuming it was just another drunk or homeless person. But Isabella saw something else. She saw the pallor, the contorted body, the lack of movement. It was an emergency. Without hesitation, she stood up and ran toward him, pushing through the passers-by. "Stand back, has anyone called 911?" Her voice, though calm, carried the authority of someone who knew what to do. As she knelt beside the man, her heart leaped. It was Arthur Sterling, the same man who, days before, had so vehemently scorned her. The irony was almost unbearable, but there was no time for reflection. A human life was at stake, and for Isabella, that was all that mattered. She quickly assessed the situation. A weak and irregular pulse, shallow breathing, cold and clammy skin. The symptoms were clear: a massive heart attack. "Mr. Sterling, can you hear me?" She tried to get a response, but he was unconscious. "I need help. Anyone know how to perform CPR?" No one spoke. Panic was beginning to spread among the onlookers who had gathered, but Isabella remained calm. Her mind, trained for chaos, worked with surgical precision. She knew every second counted. "You, call 911 and tell them we have a man with a suspected heart attack at Grand Central." She pointed to a young man filming with his cell phone. "You please help me loosen his tie and open his shirt," she instructed a frightened woman. Within seconds, she was delivering chest compressions, rhythmic and firm, with the strength and technique that only constant practice can hone. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her eyes were fixed on Arthur's pale face, her mind focused on keeping him alive. She could feel the fragility of his body beneath her hands, his life hanging by a tenuous thread. The minutes dragged on like hours. The crowd, previously indifferent, now watched in silence, mesmerized by the scene. The nurse, previously invisible, was now the center of attention, the fallen billionaire's only hope. Isabella thought nothing of revenge, nor of proving a point. She thought only of Arthur, the fragile human being who needed her help. Her dedication was unconditional, her compassion boundless. She was the embodiment of the oath she had taken: to save lives, regardless of the patient. When the ambulance sirens finally echoed through the station, bringing with them the promise of professional help, Isabella felt a momentary relief. She continued compressions until the paramedics took over, giving them a concise and accurate report on Arthur's condition. "He had a heart attack. He was unconscious. I started chest compressions immediately. Weak pulse, shallow breathing." Her voice was steady, despite her fatigue. The paramedics, impressed by her calm and professionalism, nodded. "Good job, nurse, you saved him." Isabella watched as Arthur was carried away on a stretcher, a pale, inert figure, so different from the arrogant man she had known. She felt a pang of exhaustion, but also a deep satisfaction. She had done her duty. And unbeknownst to her, she had planted the seed of a transformation that would change Arthur Sterling's life forever. If you're on tenterhooks and eager to know what happens next, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the thrilling conclusion to this story. Arthur Sterling awoke to a world of white and beeping, a stark contrast to the opulent luxury of his penthouse. The smell of disinfectant replaced the aroma of gourmet coffee, and the constant sound of medical machines was the new accompaniment to his thoughts. The pain in his chest was still a nagging presence, but the feeling of weakness was what disturbed him most. He, Arthur Sterling, the man who controlled empires, was now lying in a hospital bed, dependent on machines and people he barely knew. His first few days were a blur of tests, medications, and the constant presence of nurses and doctors. He was confused, angry, and for the first time in a long time, scared. The invincibility he'd cultivated so deeply had shattered into 1,000 pieces on the floor of Grand Central. His memory of the collapse was fragmented, but one image lingered: a woman's face leaning over him, eyes focused, hands steady, and a voice, calm and authoritative, that seemed to cut through the chaos around him. It was on the third day that he saw her again, Isabella Rossi. She was on her shift, checking his vital signs with the same serenity and professionalism he had witnessed at the station. He watched her silently at first, unable to reconcile the image of the dedicated nurse with the memory of the woman he had mocked. The phrase, "you're just a nurse," echoed in his mind, but now it sounded hollow, ridiculous, almost blasphemous. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she said, her smile gentle but without a trace of condescension or resentment. "How are you feeling today?" Her voice was soft but firm, and Arthur realized there wasn't a trace of the arrogance he'd expected to find in it. She was there, doing her job, caring for him, the man who had humiliated her. Shame struck him like a lightning bolt. He tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. I'm sorry," he finally managed to choke out, his voice hoarse and weak. Isabella looked at him, surprised but without stopping her work. "For what, Mr. Sterling?" she asked with genuine curiosity. "For what I said at that event. I was an idiot. I didn't know." He looked away, unable to hold hers. Humility was unfamiliar territory for Arthur, and he felt naked, exposed. Isabella stopped what she was doing and looked him in the eye. "Mr. Sterling, what matters now is your recovery. The past is behind us. My job is to take care of you, and that's what I will do." Her answer was simple, direct, and devoid of any judgment. There was no need to boast, to rub in her, face the fact that she had saved his life. Only compassion and professionalism. And it was at that moment that Arthur began to understand the true depths of Isabella's character. In the days that followed, Isabella became a constant presence in his room. She not only administered his medications and monitored his vital signs, but also talked to him. She talked about the hospital, her other patients, the challenges of nursing. She didn't treat him like billionaire Arthur Sterling, but like Arthur, a patient in need of care and perhaps a little company. She listened to him without judgment as he talked about the stress of his job, the loneliness of his life. And slowly, Arthur's armor began to crumble. He began observing the other nurses, the orderlies, the stretcher bearers, people who worked tirelessly, often invisible, but who were the backbone of the hospital. He saw the dedication, the patience, the humanity in every gesture. He realized that a person's worth wasn't in their bank account, but in their ability to serve, to care, to make a difference in the lives of others. And Isabella was the epitome of this. One afternoon, while Isabella was adjusting her IV, Arthur interrupted. "Isabella," he said, using her first name for the first time, "I need to thank you. You saved my life. And it wasn't just at Grandy Central, you're saving me here too." His eyes, once so cold and calculating, now shone with sincere gratitude. Isabella smiled, a smile that lit up the room. "It's my job, Mr. Sterling, it's what we do." "No," he insisted. "It's more than that. It's your passion, your dedication. I've never seen anything like it. I was blind. I thought I knew everything about the world, but I knew nothing about what really matters." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I want to do something. Something to give back. Not to you, but to the hospital. To nursing. What can I do?" The question was genuine, and Isabella felt a twinge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Arthur Sterling's arrogance had finally given way to something deeper, something more human. This twist in Arthur and Isabella's story is just the beginning of a journey of transformation and redemption. If you're moved by this shift in perspective and want to see how this story unfolds, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your interaction helps us continue telling stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. Arthur's question, "What can I do?" echoed in the hospital room, charged with a sincerity Isabella would never have expected from the billionaire who had mocked her. She watched him, noticing the vulnerability in his eyes, the genuine search for a purpose beyond profit and power. This was a different Arthur, a man who had been broken and was slowly being rebuilt, not by his own hands, but by the hands of life and, ironically, by hers. "Sterling," Isabella began, her voice soft but firm. The greatest gift you can give right now is your own recovery, and perhaps your voice. The voice of someone with your influence can make a huge difference for nursing, for public health. But that's for later. Right now, the focus is on you. She didn't want him to feel like he was being exploited, or that her gratitude was just a transaction. The change needed to be authentic, coming from within. Arthur, however, was a man of action. Inactivity bothered him. While his body healed, his ever-active mind sought new ways to process the experience. He asked for books on medicine, the history of nursing, and the healthcare system. Isabella, surprised, brought him some of her own books and articles. He devoured them, absorbing every piece of information, every statistic, every story of dedication and sacrifice. He began asking questions, many questions, about the hospital routine, the challenges faced by healthcare professionals, the lack of resources and the exhaustion. "It's incredible," he commented one day, holding a copy of a report on the nursing shortage. "I always thought hospitals were just buildings, and healthcare was a service like any other. I never stopped to think about the people behind it all, the human cost." His voice was one of genuine amazement, almost regret. Isabella simply listened, allowing him to reach his own conclusions. True change, she knew, was not imposed, but discovered. Gradually, their relationship transformed. It was no longer nurse and patient, or victim and savior. It was a connection based on mutual respect, on a tacit understanding that both had been transformed by the experience. Arthur, previously so distant and inaccessible, began sharing details of his life, the pressure of maintaining his empire, the loneliness that accompanied it. Isabella, in turn, spoke of her dreams, her challenges, the joy of seeing a patient recover, the pain of losing one. They built a bridge between their disparate worlds, a bridge made of honest conversations and moments of shared silence. When the day came for Arthur to be discharged, he felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. The hospital, once a place of suffering, had become a refuge, a place where he had confronted his own demons and found a new perspective. "Isabella," he said as she helped him dress, "I don't know how to thank you. I'll never forget what you did for me." He held out his hand and she squeezed it, a simple gesture but loaded with meaning. "Take care, Mr. Sterling," she replied, a warm smile on her lips. "And remember what we discussed. Your voice can be very powerful." Arthur nodded, his eyes fixed on hers. He knew his journey to recovery was just beginning, and that the transformation he had begun in the hospital needed to continue outside its walls. He had a new purpose, a new mission, and Isabella Rossi had been the catalyst for that change. He left the hospital in his armored car, but the world outside seemed different. The streets of New York, once just a blur of buildings and traffic, now seemed to vibrate with life, with the stories of millions of people, each with their own journey, their own challenges. He saw a homeless person and, for the first time, felt a pang of empathy, not contempt. He saw an ambulance pass by and thought of the hands that would be working inside, saving lives. His worldview had been turned upside down, and he was ready to embrace this new reality. In the months that followed, Arthur Sterling not only recovered physically, but also embarked on a journey of personal and philanthropic transformation. He began using his influence and wealth to support healthcare causes, especially nursing. He made substantial donations to St. Jude Hospital, funding training programs, nursing scholarships, and equipment upgrades. He became a public advocate for the profession, speaking at conferences, writing articles, and using his platform to combat the stigma and devaluation he himself had perpetuated. Isabella, for her part, continued her routine in the emergency room, but with a new sense of purpose. She saw the impact of Arthur's actions, the increased morale among her colleagues, the improved working conditions. Their friendship blossomed based on mutual respect and admiration. They met occasionally for lunch to discuss Arthur's projects and the hospital's challenges. There was no romance, just a deep connection between two souls who had met in a moment of crisis and who, together, had discovered the true meaning of humanity and service. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire who mocked a nurse, had become her